Hey everybody, and welcome back to the Keep 7 Gaming YouTube channel, and today we're going to be going over some more card spoilers that have been released for the upcoming Core Set 2021, which we'll be releasing on Magic the Gathering Arena on June 25th, and the physical cards, I believe, should be releasing in early July, I believe July 3rd. So I just compiled a small list that I collected over the weekend, and without further ado, we can get right into it. So the first card, I don't know the exact translation, but it looks like it's called Bufo Agitate or something like that. Essentially, this is just a weaker Mayhem Devil. It's weaker in that it costs more mana. It's 4 and a red to cast, and it's a 5/5, which I guess is better, but I think the higher mana cost for something that does exactly the same thing. If I translated correctly, it's whenever you sacrifice, or whenever a player sacrifices a creature, or permanent, I should say. Whenever a player sacrifices a permanent, this card does 1 damage to any target. I believe that is the translation. If I'm incorrect, I don't know if this is Spanish or Italian, but if you know better, please let me know, but I believe that is the translation. So I think it's just a 5/5 Mayhem Devil that costs 5 mana. So don't see it maybe getting a lot of play. You know, maybe it does. Maybe it sees a copy or two in the Jund sacrifice decks or something like that. But I just think Mayhem Devil's better because it's cheaper. Yeah, it's just cheaper, so I think it's more mana efficient. I think this would cost too much mana to cast, and you're gonna want Mayhem Devil down sooner rather than later, and this guy would obviously be a later card. So, not sure that it would see a lot of play. Potentially it does, but anyway, moving on to the next card, we have Peer into the Abyss, which has some pretty horrifying art. It is a 7 mana sorcery, 4 and 3 blacks to cast. Target player draws cards equal to half the number of cards in their library and loses half their life. Round up each time. So that's pretty incredible. I think that could see definitely some play in some janky decks. Drawing out half your library is pretty insane. If you combine that with, like, I don't know, there are certain combinations where I feel like that could be pretty insane. Definitely would have some jank potential. Like, if you draw half your library, if you can somehow, like, make your opponent also do that. Isn't there I think there's like a red, I think there's like an Is It spell where you can, like, create a copy of a spell and make a new target. You can make your opponent the target of this, so they draw out half their library, and if they have, man, that would be so jank. If you do like that role reversal with Vilis, Broker of Blood, and you have Underworld Dreams, and that I mean, that's too jank. But anyway, it'd be cool if you could somehow copy this and make your opponent the target, make them draw out half their library, they lose half their life or something like that. But yeah, I think this sees some play in some janky decks and stuff like that. I probably won't play it because that art just scares the living shit out of me, but to each their own. The next card is Bad Deal. It's a 6 mana, 4 and 2 black sorcery. You draw 2 cards, and each opponent discards 2 cards. Each player loses 2 life. I do think that this is a bad deal. I think there are better cards out there for you to draw 2. Your opponent discarding 2 isn't a huge deal, and each player losing 2 life. I don't think this is a great card. I think, like, Foreboding Fruit is a better draw 2. I don't know when that rotates out, but I think a 6 mana draw 2, the value you get out of this, I don't think is worth the mana that you're putting in. I think there are better ways to draw cards. That this is kind of a moot point. Well, not a moot point. I think this is a dead card. I don't think that this card sees play at all. The next card is Rin Siri, the Inseparable. This has been dubbed the Cat Dog card, although in its type it's called Dog Cat. I really think they missed a great opportunity to make this the Cat Dog card. Anyway, Rin Siri, the Inseparable, costs 4 mana, 1, a red, a green, and a white. To cast. Whenever you cast a dog spell, create a 1/1 green cat creature token. Whenever you cast a cat spell, create a 1/1 white dog creature token. And then for a red, a green, and a white, you can tap them, and Rin Siri Inseparable deals damage to any target equal to the number of dogs you control. You gain life equal to the number of cats you control. It's a 4/4. I love it. I love dogs. I love cats. Again, for those of you who don't know, the Hound creature type has been changed to dog. So there are doggos in Magic the Gathering now, I suppose. But yeah, I mean, I really like the card because I like dogs and cats. I like tribal decks. If you make like a dog and cat tribal deck, I think that's super cool. And this is a cool way to kind of conjoin the two tribal decks that you might want to make a awesome pet duo tribal deck of dogs and cats. And it's a bit, I mean, I don't think that this particularly sees competitive play, but I think for those of us who want to make not a janky, but for those of us who want to make a cute tribal deck of dogs and cats, I think this is going to be a great card and a staple for a dog cat deck. It's a 4/4, so a solid body, and its tappable ability, I think, it adds a little bit of a cool interaction if you decide to make that kind of a deck. So a 4/4 for 4 with some interesting abilities, I think is pretty dope. I mean, if you are playing a cat dog or dog cat tribal deck, and you're playing cats and dogs every turn, you're going to be creating a lot of 1/1s. So I think that deck could be pretty powerful. I mean, if I'm playing some tribal decks right now and I'm putting them up on the channel, I think I just played wolf. I'm trying to do cat right now. I'm trying to brew up a better. The cat deck I made is just terrible. So I'm still trying to brew up one that would be interesting to watch, because the one that I made is just not. So I'm a little frustrated making tribal decks that just aren't powerful enough to really win a ton of games. So, if this card can kind of push through to make a dog cat or cat dog tribal deck better, then great. Yay for us tribal deck players. Next is Chromatic Orion. I might have already mentioned this in one of my videos. I think this may have been actually released in the Variety Show and I might have missed it. But anyway, it's a 7 mana legendary artifact. It's a lot like Chromatic Lantern. You may spend mana as though it were mana of any color, and then you can tap it to add 7, or is that 5? 5 colorless mana, and then for 5 mana you can tap it, draw a card for each color among permanents you control. So yeah, it's a Chromatic Lantern that costs 7 mana, and then it also has some tappable abilities where you can add a ton of colorless mana, and then you can also draw a bunch of cards. So again, I think this is a jank card. I think this is a great jank card, for all of us 5-color deck players, which I have a lot of decks that were 5 colors, and then Fires of Invention went away, and now I have a lot less. But for those of us who brew 5-color decks that are difficult mana-wise, this will help, especially with Shocklands rotating out soon. With Shock, if you're playing a 5-color deck, you're already at a disadvantage because you have constraints as far as mana. Losing Shocklands is going to be huge, so anything that lets us spend mana of any color is going to be great. The problem is this is 7 mana, and by the time you get up to 7 mana, the game's probably already over anyway, because if you're playing a janky 5-color deck, unless you're playing some sort of aggressive 5-color deck or something that has an early board presence, most of mine don't. Most of mine wait until turn 4 or 3 or something like that because of Chromatic Lantern or Fires of Invention, which obviously is now banned. I just think by the time you reach 7 mana, you probably have already played the spells you want to play using the color combinations you need from mana that you already have on the board. So I really don't think that you may spend mana as though it were of any color really makes sense. Having to wait to 7, but having to wait until you reach 7 mana to be able to spend mana of any color kind of seems a little redundant. Like, you need this earlier as opposed to later. So I don't know how I really feel about this card, but it is what it is. The next card is Containment Priest. It's a 2 mana, 1 and a white to cast, human cleric creature with flash, which is interesting, a flash white creature. If a non-token creature would enter the battlefield and it wasn't cast, exile it instead. It's a 2/2. I'm just thinking about that text. That's actually pretty interesting. That shuts down a lot, like your Divine Visitation and like Outlaw's Merriment. This would shut those down. So this could be a very solid sideboard inclusion, in the same way that Hushbringer is a pretty solid sideboard inclusion for a lot of your like Enter the Battlefield, your ETB effects. This would be really good if you come up against a deck that is heavy on tokens, which we don't really see too much right now in the meta. I mean, I've seen a few Outlaw's Merriment decks out there and stuff like that. I've seen Divine Visitation, but it's not like rampant. So I don't know that this particularly would be a great inclusion. If somebody's playing like a Finale of Glory, I mean, 1 copy of this I think would be interesting. As a sideboard inclusion, because if you play somebody and their win con is like Finale of Glory, the Divine Visitation, or something like that, you can include this and then you shut down their token creation. So, yeah. If a non-token creature would enter the battlefield and it wasn't cast, Never mind. I read that totally wrong. If a non-token creature would enter the battlefield and it wasn't cast, exile it instead. So this shuts down your Lukas. So disregard everything I just said because it's non-token creatures, not token creatures. So, you know, if something would enter the battlefield and it wasn't cast, so this shuts down your Lukas, this shuts down your Winotas. So this might be why they didn't ban Winota, because they have an answer to Winota right here. So this would be a great sideboard card if you play against a Winota player, but Winota players probably aren't playing best of 3. And that's the problem. I don't think that Wizards of the Coast realize that most of the people who play the high-risk, high-reward decks don't play high-risk, high-reward decks in best of 3. They play it in best of 1 because they get the high risk, they get the high reward, and once they win, it's over. They got the win that they needed. So really, I don't know if this sees play at all because it's a sideboard card. You're not going to be playing those high risk, high reward decks probably in best of 3. It just doesn't make sense to play those decks because once you figure out what their combination is, you just hold counter magic, you hold removal magic or whatever until they do their combo and you just remove it and you shut them down and that's it. So yeah, I don't know that this card is terribly important, but could be a sideboard card if you come up against somebody who has some sort of janky, you know, exiling stuff to play something and not hard casting it, but I don't know that really matters. Next is a card which took some translation, so forgive me if I get this wrong. This looks like some sort of, I don't know if that's Japanese or Chinese. I'm not worldly enough to really know the difference. But more or less, this is the translation I got. It's Cryptic Masterpiece. It's a 2-mana artifact. You can tap it to add a page counter. You can pay 2 mana, tap it to add a page counter and draw a card. And then when it has 4 or more page counters on it, you exile it and gain 4 life. It's cool, I guess. I don't know. Great card draw. It's a rare, so clearly it's a good card. But like, I imagine you're going to want to pay 2 mana to add the page counter and draw a card as opposed to just adding a page counter, because if you just add page counters, you're just tapping it 4 turns in a row to add 4 counters to it to exile it and gain 4 life. I think there are better ways to gain life faster. So probably you're paying the 2 mana to add a page counter, draw a card. So paying 2 mana to draw a card and tap this, I guess is good enough. Maybe if you're in a pinch. And you know, maybe for mana efficiency's sake, you have 2 mana open and you just rather get like a card in your hand or something, but I don't know how great really this would be. Next we have Pack Leader. It's a 2 mana dog creature. I think this is the Dog Lord they mentioned that would be getting released. It's 2 mana, 1 and a white to cast. Other dogs you control get +1/+1. It's not legendary, so you can have multiples out here, so you can buff all your dogs. Potentially a great inclusion if you're making the Ren and Stimpy, or what is their names, Rin and whatever, Rin and Siri. If you're playing like a Rin and Sari deck, you know, he'd be a good inclusion. He'd buff all your dogs, even the tokens that Ren and Siri create. Whenever Pack Leader attacks, prevent all combat damage that would be dealt this turn to dogs you control. So, you know, pretty powerful. I mean, that's a pretty powerful card. You can just swing in with all your dogs, prevent all combat damage that would be dealt to them if he's attacking as well, and they all get +1/+1. So you can, you know, if you're playing Rin and Seer, you play Pack Leader, you create a bunch of tokens, you have a really wide board, you throw him down, all your dogs get +1/+1. You can swing with all your dogs. They all don't get any combat damage dealt to them. And it's to prevent all combat damage that would be dealt this turn to dogs you control. So it includes him. It's not other dogs you control. So it's like if you swing in with him and he doesn't die because combat damage is prevented to him, the one thing is if he gets removed. So if you swing all in with all your dogs and with Pack Leader and they remove him, all of a sudden all your dogs are -1/-1 again, or they lose the +1/+1. And they're all susceptible to dying. So I guess that's a fair risk to take. So if you swing in and they have removal for him, you can lose a lot of dogs. But if they don't have removal and you swing in, you don't lose all your dogs anyway. But, you know, it's not like it gives them vigilance. So you'd have to kind of prepare for blockers. But maybe that's what you save your cats for if you're playing Rin and Siri. All right, moving on. Next we have Quarian Dryad. It's a 2 mana, 1 and a green to cast creature Dryad. Whenever you cast a spell that's white, blue, black, or red, So essentially non-green. Put a +1/+1 counter on Quarian Dryad. So could be a solid 5-color deck card. You know, just a body to put on the field. If you're playing like some weird 5-color janky deck, you can throw her down on turn 2 as you wait to kind of prepare your 5-color madness that's going to be coming around. And as you play all the different color spells that aren't green, you put a +1/+1 counter on her. So you can get a body on the field with substantial power and toughness if you need to. So yeah, I don't hate it. I don't love it. I don't think it's going to be like the next best card, but I think it's cool. Those are my thoughts. Next is Fungal Rebirth. 3 mana, 2 and a green to cast. Instant. Return target permanent card from your graveyard to your hand. If a creature died this turn, create 2 1/1 green sapperling creature tokens. I think this was really good for like your mutators. Like if you have obviously mutators are huge targets for removal. As soon as you mutate onto one creature several times, which is kind of encouraged with mutate because the more things mutate, the more triggers you get. So as you mutate more and more onto one specific creature, the more likely it becomes that they're gonna remove it. So if you have this in your back pocket after you mutate, they kill what you mutated. You can get that you can get probably the most important mutator you might have had back into your hand, and then you also create 2 1/1 green sapling creature tokens, which are more targets for removal. So if you only had the one card out there, you have two more targets that you can target for mutators to get your mutator back onto the field in a mutate fashion to get another trigger. So I think this is solid for your cards that mutate. I wish the Sapperlings had some sort of ability. Like, I mean, it would be lifelink if it was white, or like, I don't know, maybe tap for 1 mana of any color or something in green. I just wish that the tokens had, the tokens that you get have some sort of ability. So like when you mutate onto them, you're just not mutating onto like a dead target that doesn't have any other abilities. Because obviously, as you know, when you mutate onto something, you get all the abilities of everything, underneath or on top of the mutate target. So if they had lifelink, if they had tap 1 mana of any color, it would just give them something to make them a better mutate target. But I guess if you're creating 2 of them, it makes another target for your, it gives your opponent another 2 targets that they need to remove. So if they removed your mutate target, they need 2 more removal spells to get rid of your 2 more mutate targets. So at the very least, you're probably going to be able to, if you get your mutator back into your hand, you can recast it onto one of these 1/1 green tokens, hopefully on your next turn. So you get another mutate trigger. So I guess this is fair, more or less. Next is Gadrak, the Crown Scourge. It's a 3 mana legendary, 2 and a red to cast. Legendary dragon creature. Flying Gadrak, the Crown Scourge, can't attack unless you control 4 or more artifacts. So that's pretty weird. The beginning of your end step, create a treasure token for each non-token creature that died this turn. It's an artifact, so there you go. So if you don't have any artifacts on the field, you have to wait 4 turns for him to be able to attack, I guess, as he creates treasure tokens, and the treasure tokens add some ramp for you. So I like this a lot. This will add a lot of ramp. It's an early body. He can't attack, but he can block, and a 5/4 blocker is solid on turn 3, I think, right? Definitely a target for early removal. So if you at the very least, you get some ramp down if they remove him early. You lose a legendary rare, but I think this is if you play Dragon Tribal, solid. If you play any sort of red ramp, you're ramping up to stuff. I think this is a solid body. I mean, there are a lot of, I feel like big red has not seen play. And what I mean by big red, for those of you who don't know, obviously there's a lot of the mono red aggro and stuff that we see in the meta, but big red is like playing red for the big creatures, which not a lot of people do. We have the big dragons, we have Drakuseth, and Drakuseth is mostly like a janky reanimator target and stuff like that. I think like nobody really plays big red anymore. Cavalier of Flame, I guess, was kind of big red, and Jess Guy Fires, but that was like a different version. Like I'm talking like true big red, just like mono red, ramping up to the big, dragon creatures and all that. Nobody really plays it because it's not really powerful enough. So this could help you get there. I mean, this could help, it's a 5/4 body on the field to help you block early. It helps you ramp every turn with some more mana and artifacts. If you want to sacrifice those for mana, you can choose to do that to ramp up to other big creatures, or you can just save them and let him attack if you control a bunch of artifacts. If you make like a big red Embercleave deck, where like Embercleave is on a big creature, it gives it first strike and all that, like this could be, and that counts as an artifact, that could be pretty cool. So I think it would be cool to play big red, and I would definitely include him in a big red deck. Next, we have Jess Guy Elder. It's a 2-mana, 1 and a blue to cast Human Monk with Prowess. Whenever you cast a non-creature spell, this creature gets +1/+1 till end of turn. When Jess Guy Elder deals combat damage to a player, you may draw a card. If you do, discard a card. She is a 1/2. Solid. I think that's solid. If you're playing like a Jess Guy, not control, but if you are playing Jess Guy control, potentially a good card. But if you're playing like some sort of not creature-based deck, I think she's a solid body to have on the field. The 1/2 makes her strong against the 1/1 aggro decks. 2 mana, so she's cheap. And every time you cast a non-creature spell, she gets +1/+1. So you can swing in with a decent body, or you can have a decent blocker. So yeah, I don't hate her. I don't think I'd say she's pretty. I think this is a pretty good card. Next, we have Maleficent Scythe. Again, this is another card that needed translation, so if I get this wrong, let me know. But it's, I think, Maleficent Scythe? Maybe Malicious Scythe? Something like that. It costs 2 mana, 1 and a black to cast. It's an artifact equipment. It enters with a soul counter, and the equipped creature gets +1/+1 for each soul counter on Maleficent or Magnificent Scythe. Whenever equipped creature dies, put a soul counter on Magnificent Scythe or something, and you can equip it for 1 mana. So I think this is like an interesting. I think this is interesting because like you can equip it onto a creature, and your intention is to have that creature die. So you can just swing in with it, it dies, and then you put another +1/+1 counter on this, on this, and you can equip it for 1. So it's a cheap equip. This could be like, in a sacrifice deck or something. Like, I think this could be kind of cool, interesting. Or if you make a deck where your intention is to let things die while using this, and then just let this get really big and then attach it to like a big bomb, I think that would be pretty cool. Is it mono Black's Embercleave? I don't think so. Is it as good as Shadow Spear? I don't think so. But I think it's a cool card, and I think you could make some pretty cool decks, or some, you can make something pretty cool out of this. Next card is Necromancy. It's 3 mana, 1 and 2 blacks to cast, sorcery. Choose a card name other than a basic land card name. Search target opponent's graveyard, hand, and library for any number of cards with that name and exile them. That player shuffles their library, then creates a 2/2 black zombie creature token for each card exiled from their hand this way. So I think this card is pretty bad in the same way that Unmoored Ego is bad, except with Unmoored Ego, you're giving them cards to draw, so you're giving them card advantage, and in this, you're giving them board presence that you need to answer the next turn. So as great as like Unmoored Ego and Necromancy are against decks that have specific cards that are their win condition, like cycling, and with the cat decks, if you get rid of like Witch's Oven and stuff like that, or like any number of targets from the cat decks that would kind of shut them down somewhat. I just don't think that, I think as cool as it is to get rid of win conditions, it's just not strong enough, and it provides your opponent with too much advantage. If you're getting rid, if you get rid of 4 Zenith Flares, you give them 4 2/2 black zombie creature tokens, so you have 4 2/2s that you have to contend with on the board. You're giving them a board presence that you need to answer. So I think Necromancy and Unmoored Ego, for those of you who think those are good cards, they're just not. You're giving your opponent card advantage with Unmoored Ego, which is not good, and with Necromancy, I mean, it's situational, of course. Like, you could shut their deck down entirely with Unmoored Ego or with this card. But more often than not, I think when you're using this card, it's probably a feels bad situation. I think more likely than not, you're setting yourself up to lose the game as opposed to winning the game. If you already have a board presence that's amazing and you cast this, I mean, I guess, but like, if you're casting this late game, I don't think, if you're casting this late game, I don't know. I just don't know. I think that they'll have the answers they need. Like, if you have a great board presence, you create 4 2/2 black zombie creature tokens for them. Like, the odds are they either already have a board presence or their deck doesn't require a board presence. So, if they have 4 2/2 black zombie creature tokens and you think you have the game in hand because you have a bunch of 4/4s and 5/5s out there, they'll just wipe the board or something like that. So I just don't think that this card is good, and I don't think Unmoored Ego is good. I think those are overrated cards that provide your opponent with too much advantage. This card is probably better than Unmoored Ego in that it just provides them with a board presence, as opposed to, I think card advantage is probably better than 4/2/2 board presence, or like a 2/2/2 board presence or something like that. But I just don't think that those cards are good. I think that people who think that they're good are a little short-sighted, perhaps. But who knows? Maybe I'm an idiot. But those cards, nobody plays Unmoored Ego, so I think I'm right. And I think you're wrong if you think I'm wrong. Oh, man. I'm kidding. I love you. The next card is Indulging Patrician. It's a 3 mana, 1, a white, and a black to cast. It's a vampire noble creature. It has flying, lifelink, and at the beginning of your end step, if you gain 3 or more life this turn, each opponent loses 3 life, and it's a 1/4. I like it. I mean, a 3 mana 1/4 is meh, but I think a 1/4 is good against, aggro decks. I mean, turn 3 is a little late to cast a 1/4. I'd prefer to cast a 1/4 on turn 2, like a Fae of Wishes or something to shut down aggro decks. But I think a 3 mana 1/4 it's a little late to cast a 1/4, but it's not too late. And if you already have somewhat of a board presence established, she could just be kind of the nail in the coffin. How apt, as she is a vampire. I'll kill myself. So yeah, at the beginning of your end step, if you gained 3 or more life this turn, each opponent loses 3 life. So as we've already seen, they have, what is his name? Veto or something. It was another spoiled card. So lifelink looks like it's gaining, lifelink and life drain look like they're gaining a lot of cards in this set. You're getting, if you're playing to gain life, each opponent loses 3 life with this, and with Veto, anytime you gain life, that opponent loses that much life. So, like, lifelink vampires could be a pretty solid setup. So yeah, and I like the card art. She's like holding the dude all role reversally and just like bit his neck, and he's like, ugh, and she's like, yeah. So that's that. Anyway, moving on. I'm getting nutty. It's late. Primal Might. X and 1 green mana to cast. Sorcery. Target creature you can... Actually, it's not late. It's 2 p.m. You can see that in the bottom right corner, can't you? Yeah, I lied. Anyway, Primal Might. X and 1 green mana. Target creature... Or maybe the video is just going on too long. Sorcery. Target creature you control gets +X until end of turn. Then it fights up to 1 target creature you don't control. It's kind of like your Rabid Bites, except... Yeah, kind of like Rabid Bite. Well, no, Rabid Bite I think deals damage based on power to another creature, so it's just a fight spell that I don't know. I'm not a huge fan of fight spells, but the fact that it's +X is pretty powerful, because you can determine what is necessary to give a creature before it fights. So you can save a creature by using this, as opposed to just in a lot of situations, fight cards are just dead in your hand because if you played it, you would also kill the creature that is fighting. So this is actually a solid replacement for those cards. I actually don't hate this. For your decks that have fighting abilities and stuff, or if you're using fight as removal, I think this is probably better than a lot of the cards that are out there. And the fact that it's 1 green and X is pretty strong. If it was like any other combination and X, or like XX or something, that would be pretty brutal. But anyway, next card, Rewind. It's a 4 mana, 2 and 2 blue instant. Counter target spell, untap up to 4 lands. I like it. 4 mana counter spell is pretty expensive. I think everybody's kind of getting used to having 3 mana counter spells, but untapping up to 4 lands is pretty fucking cool, especially with counter spells. I mean, if you have 2 in your hand and you use this to counter 1, and then you untap 4 and you have like a Sinister Sabotage, Mystical Dispute, 2 Mystical Disputes or something, if you're playing counter spell heavy deck, I think this is solid. I think this is really cool, and I like it a lot. Again, 4 mana is pretty expensive for a counterspell, but untapping 4 lands is unreal value. Will open up the ability for, if you want a counter target spell, untap 4 lands, and if you're playing like Simic, you can you're opening up 4 mana could also be a Nightpack Ambusher, could also be a Frilled Mystic. So if you don't have like a Temur Reclamation, if you don't have Wilderness Reclamation on the field and you need another counterspell like set up for the next turn, cast this and save your Frilled Mystic, save your Nightpack Ambusher, save a Sinister Sabotage, save a Mystical Dispute, save any number of those cards in your hand. As your opponent casts their next spell, you can decide what you want to do. Cast the Nightpack Ambusher at flash speed, cast the Frilled Mystic to counter a spell and get a 3/2 body on the field. I love it. As you can tell, I spoke really fast, which means I'm passionate. Next is Soo Miah. Okay, so this one needs translation, and I did not translate this one. I thought this was just a card, so I don't know what this does. Destroy target creature or planeswalker with converted mana cost less than 3. Boom! Translation. I know languages. I don't even know what language this is, but I figured that out. I mean, it's not that hard. So yeah, it's a 2 mana, 1 and a black to cast. Destroy target creature or planeswalker with converted mana cost 3 or less. A 2 mana answer to a 3 mana or less 3 mana or less creature or planeswalker, I think is solid. Especially because we've seen at the very least that there will be a 3 mana planeswalker in the set. Basir, I think his name is, or something like that. I think that this card is solid removal. I think we already have cards out there like this already, but you know, the more the better. And I will probably be including this card in, you know, as a sideboard card or main decking, depending on where the meta shifts. Definitely solid for aggro, as there are a lot of low mana creatures. But you know, you don't want to be removing a 1/1 for 1. You want to be removing, you know, something. You probably want to be removing a 2 mana spell. It's less than 3, so you can't do anything 3 or greater. So if you're trading 2 mana, if you're using 2 mana to get rid of a 2 mana spell, planeswalker less than 3, equal to, igual converted mana I think this is converted mana cost equal to 3 or less. So yeah, so your 3 manas are included. So the fact, if this was 2 mana or less, I'd say this is a dead card, but it's 3 mana or less. You really want to be spending this card to remove things that are 3 mana or less. I just saw igual here, and so I'm thinking this is equal to, so converted mana cost equal to 3 or less. Okay, cool. And then the last card we have is another one that requires translation, and this one I actually did my job and translated beforehand. It is Tidal Whale. Creatures your opponent controls get -1/-0. Oh, by the way, it's a 7 mana spell, 5 and 2 blues to cast. I'm assuming whale creature. I don't know what the creature type is officially yet, but anyway, creatures your opponent controls get -1/-0, and then he has an ability for 1 and a blue. You can discard a card, look at the top 2 cards of your library, choose one, put it into your hand, and the other put it into the graveyard. So kind of backing up cycling here. I think that's probably pretty solid, especially as we're coming off a deck that had cycling in the set. So this is just another way to keep cycling kind of alive in this set. But is it really worth including, you know, if you're making a cycling, I think the cycling deck has been made. The competitive cycling deck is done and made. It's the uncommon Zenith Flare annoying piece of shit deck that I hate playing against because it's so frustrating, that requires 0 interaction and it doesn't feel like you're playing Magic at all. It's already done. People made the cycling deck. That's the cycling deck. Anybody who tries any other cycling deck is probably playing a suboptimal one, which is fine. I think that's totally cool. If you want to play suboptimal cycling, all the power to you. I hope you make something that's fun and awesome. There were tons of high-level cycling cards out there. It's just like, why would you play those if you have other cycling cards to, you know, if the good competitive cycling deck exists, it's just discouraging for people to play the high mana cycling ones, because if you come up against the good cycler, you're dead in the water. Puns, because it's a whale. Anyway, yeah, so I think it's cool. I like it. A 7/7 body, and it has it's not cycling officially ability, but more or less you're drawing a card and discarding a card. It's more or less cycling. So it's like pseudo cycling, I guess you could say. Would you include this in a cycling deck? Again, I don't think so. The cycling deck is out there. You can play it. And if you're making like a cycling deck with like Lava Serpent and the you know, that rock guy and Yadaro and all that, if you're making like a cycling deck, you don't probably include this guy because he doesn't actually have cycling. But it's cool. I think the art is dope. I look at that. That's so sick. It's probably super pixelated. I mean, it is super pixelated even for me, but like, I like it. I think it looks cool. That's quite a whale. And yeah, so that's it. Those are the cards that I was able to find and dig through and find and bring up. So I probably missed a bunch. There's probably still a lot more out there. So, you know, go out there, go hunting. You have a lot of resources. There's, you know, people are putting stuff out there on Twitter, YouTube. There are a bunch of Reddits that include, or I should say, there are a bunch of subreddits that have a bunch of these cards. People are posting them all the time. So I'm using like all those resources to kind of collect all these together and put them in one place for you. So if you're liking the content, if you're liking the spoils, if you're liking the commentary, let me know. If you're not liking it, then fuck you. Nah, just kidding. Let me know and I can improve. I can get better. I can change. Please. Thanks for watching.